Okay, let's just jump right in. Today we have a deep dive into one of the most powerful and I would argue one of the most conflicted figures of the Spanish Golden Age.
Hmm.
We're talking about a writer who, on one hand, served God with this, intense devotion, but on the other, he crafted these literary masterpieces that challenged the very authority he'd sworn obedience to.
We are diving into the world of Baltasar Gracian and his monumental work, El Criticón. And for a lot of modern readers, he's kind of an obscure name.
He really is.
Yet his philosophy, this sort of pragmatic survival in a cynical world, it captivated thinkers like Schopenhauer and Nietzsche centuries later.
And that's really our mission today. We want to uncover why this one Jesuit priest became a philosophical beacon for skepticism, for pragmatism, and how a quest to define worldly wisdom led him straight into, well, punishment.
And the source material just immediately throws you into that incredible duality. He was born in Belmonte, became a Jesuit in 1619, and he isn't just a literary stylist. He's noted as one of the most profound Spanish psychologists of his time. He had both this intense intellectual discipline and what the sources call an intuitive subtlety about how human vanity works.
It's the ultimate contradiction, isn't it? A man who sought knowledge, spiritual perfection, but his path to literary fame was paved with disobedience. It really signals the conflict wasn't about faith.
Not at all.
It was about genius and discipline and, I guess, time.
Precisely. And to understand Gracian, you have to start with his medium. He was the undisputed master of the Baroque style, known as conceptismo. It's the engine driving everything he thought. The way he wrote was the way he thought.
So let's define that. Because if we're going to get his genius, we have to grasp conceptismo. I mean, what does this style even involve? How does it differ from just, being clever?
Well, conceptismo is intellectual firepower packed into the smallest possible space. It's not about flowery language or these long descriptive phrases.
Right, that was the other style.
That's the competing style. Culturnismo, yeah. The Gongora style. Gracian rejected that completely. Instead, conceptismo focuses on the concept, the sharp idea you get through metaphors, through wit, through ingenio.
So it's less about the beauty of the words and more about that, like, sudden shock of recognition. When you slam two ideas together and find a deeper truth, it sounds demanding for the reader.
It is absolutely demanding. It forces the reader to participate. Gracian's sentences are short, they're aphoristic, and they function like a little philosophical puzzle. The goal isn't just to inform,
But to train your mind.
exactly, to exercise the reader's judgment. The sources laud his metaphors and the subtlety of his thought. For Gracian, this wasn't just showing off. It was a moral requirement for survival in a deceptive world.
That context is so important. He was basically giving people the intellectual weapons they needed to succeed in the courts of 17th century Spain.
Mm.
And this obsession with excellence and prudence, it's all over his earlier works too.
Absolutely. Those earlier books show this sustained, focused effort to define the perfect man. In 1637, he published El Hero, the Hero, dedicated to King Felipe IV.
A blueprint for the ideal person.
A master of self-control, yeah. Then comes El Politico in 1640 for the ideal ruler.
And then the big one. In 1647, the book that became so popular, Oráculo Manual y Arte de Ingenio, or The Art of Worldly Wisdom.
If you look at that trajectory, you see a man building a systematic manual for secular success. He wasn't writing typical devotional literature. This was practical ethics. He was obsessed with discretion, judgment, teaching people how to be effective.
How to get ahead without losing your integrity.
And a world designed to crush both. Yes.
And that focus, that very worldly focus on power and effectiveness, is what put him on a collision course with the Jesuits.
It did. And the pinnacle of his literary career, which was also the catalyst for his downfall, was El Criticón, this massive allegorical novel.
Let's talk about that publication history, because this is where his whole theme of prudence, or maybe the lack of it, really comes into play. Part 1 comes out in 1651. And what does he do to hide it from his superiors?
He publishes it under the name Lorenzo Gracian.
Which was
his brother's name. I mean, it's so telling. This was a necessary deception because he knew he was breaking a serious rule.
And he keeps that disguise for part 2 in 1653, and then the final part in 1657. So for anyone listening who's thinking, what's the big deal? It's just a book. Why did a Jesuit priest have to hide his identity like this?
That tension really gets to the core power structure of the Jesuit order. The rules required licentiate superior official permission from a superior before publishing anything.
Anything at all.
And Grayson's superiors saw his passion for literature and the sheer amount of time a novel like this takes as a direct conflict with his vows.
His job was teaching sacred scripture. So it wasn't heresy they were mad about. It was a kind of, an organizational failure.
Exactly. It was about time management and focus. The order saw his literary fame as personal glory, and they felt it was taking precedence over his spiritual duties. He was diverting energy from sacred texts to what they saw as, vain, worldly exploration.
We should probably pause here and talk about what the book was actually about. What did he risk everything for? What is El Criticón?
It's a deep and honestly a pretty dark allegory. You follow two main characters, Critiilo, the prudent, experienced man.
The man of judgment.
Right. And Andrinio, who is the natural, naive man, sort of fresh from the wild. They travel across Europe looking for this ultimate court of truth and virtue, but everywhere they go, they just find vanity, deceit, and failure.
It's basically a grand tour of human vice. And because of that cold-eyed realism, the book just exploded across Europe.
Staggering success, yes.
Yeah.
It was translated into every major European language almost immediately. This wasn't just a hit in Spain, it was a European phenomenon.
And that reach put him in conversation with some of the sharpest minds of the Enlightenment. And later, you see his influence on French moralists like La Rochefoucauld, La Bruyère.
All of them. People who were also obsessed with the cunning and self-interest that drives human behavior. And that connection sets the stage for his deepest philosophical impact centuries later.
So tell us why Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, two thinkers who were so critical of Christian morality, would be so drawn to the work of a Jesuit priest. What was that connection?
They loved him because his philosophy was pragmatic. It was cold, it was almost immoral in its application, even if his final goal was religious. Gratian teaches you how to survive power structures, how to use discretion as a weapon.
And how to preserve yourself in a world driven by vanity. That sounds a lot like Nietzsche's will to power.
It's very close. Schopenhauer, who actually translated The Art of Worldly Wisdom into German, saw Gracian as a supreme realist, a guide on how to survive what he saw as the wretchedness of existence.
And Nietzsche?
Nietzsche appreciated his ability to just strip away all the sentimentality and look at human ambition with a kind of clinical precision. Gracian gave them a vocabulary for psychological realism that went way beyond his own religious context.
So he left behind a philosophy that's really about winning, surviving, being effective.
Exactly. Which is why it resonated so deeply with those later, very cynical thinkers. But that incredible philosophical reach, it didn't protect him from the very real, very physical consequences back in Spain.
Right. So now we pivot to the reckoning. The moment the order realizes their most famous, unauthorized author is one of their own. This is 1657. What was the price he paid for literary fame? The provincial, Billes and Dupiquer, comes down on him hard. What did they do?
The punishment was comprehensive. It was designed to strip him of his identity as an intellectual. First, he was deprived of his teaching chair, his cathedra.
Which is more than just losing a job. That's taking away his entire intellectual standing.
His legitimacy, and that was just the start.
It's just the beginning.
He was also deprived of his voice. He lost the right to speak or vote in any community discussions. For a man defined by his ingenio, his words, being silenced like that, it was a profound punishment.
So he's shamed, silenced, removed from the intellectual life of the order. And then come the physical penances.
He was put on a penitence diet, basically bread and water, and confined to the College of Tarazona. This was the order showing him, in no uncertain terms, that they held absolute authority over his body, his mind, and his time.
It's an academic's worst nightmare. The great theorist of worldly success being publicly humiliated for his own lack of institutional discretion.
The irony is just crushing, isn't it? He understood prudence better than anyone, yet he chose to ignore it when his own passion was on the line.
How did he respond to all this? Did he fight back or did he just submit?
He was in immense pain. The sources show he tried to reconcile. He requested a transfer to another province to try and mitigate the punishment. We have a letter from April 1658 where he says he wants the penitences to end, but he also refers to them as necessary for obedience.
So even with all that internal conflict, he still recognized he had to submit to the order's authority.
He did. His final years, from 1657 to his death in 1658, were defined by that submission. He remained a Jesuit. He adhered to the penances. Some sources describe his face near the end of his life as marked by melancholy, but also, quote, purified by suffering.
So what's the ultimate legacy here? What should we take away from this man who lived and died right at that intersection of institutional rules and individual genius?
Gratian is the ultimate example of that struggle. His philosophy is one of pragmatic realism, a clear-eyed guide to navigating human nature that requires subtlety, wit, and, above all, discretion. He gave us a manual for survival.
And yet, the author of the Ultimate Manual for Worldly Prudence failed to apply that core lesson to his own life. He defied the very powerful organization he belonged to.
That's the enduring paradox. He sacrificed his comfort, his career, for the very work that argues for calculated, careful behavior.
Which leaves us with a really provocative thought for you to take away. If Gracian had shown the proper prudence and obedience, El Criticon, his masterpiece, the book that influenced Nietzsche, it might never have existed. So if profound wisdom sometimes requires defiance, does that failure of prudence make his philosophy weaker? Or does the fact that he was willing to suffer for his art make his pursuit of genius stronger?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, if some truths can only be forged in disobedience.
Indeed. We really appreciate you supplying us with the material for this deep dive into the controversial genius of Baltasar Gracian. We'll see you next time.